Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to do a deep dive into the weekly metagame breakdown for the best decks in Standard after rotation. We had Edge of Eternities come. It's a whole new MTG Arena rank ladder. We got a whole bunch of exciting stuff, and there's honestly like 12, 15 decks I got today. There's a lot of decks. I got a lot of tabs open here ready to show you. So we're getting the data from UntappedGG for this one here. We've done some MTGO stuff. But we're starting to get some data in, so I want to take a look at what's happening in terms of the metagame, stuff like that. If you want to use Untap, link is in the video description, so you can get set up today, track your games, use some of their stat tools, overlays, stuff like that. I'll timestamp and link all these deck lists for importable ones in the video description as well, so you can just copy and paste from there. While you're there, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, free, easy, helps us out. We're trying to hit 20,000 by the end of the summer. We're like 1,600 away, so you can do your part to help out and keep these things going. So let's jump into it. We're going to start popularity of the day, so just kind of seeing where the metagame sits. So it's the third day of the month after ladder reset, so we're going to take a look at Platinum to Mythic. As we go for next week, we'll start moving the scale up to Diamond and Mythic, and then eventually just Mythic. So Orzhov, Sacrifice, Sephiroth decks are the most popular right now at 10% on the ladder. We have Esper Pixie at about just a shade under 10. Vivi decks is a Vivi at 9. We have the Dimir Midrange at 7.5. Temur Battlecrier at about 6.5. Jeskai is about 6%. And then we have Gruul, which is going to be kind of this one here is likely going to be the Tifa deck. A lot of the mono green landfalls have shifted to Gruul with a splash of blue in the sideboard. And then we have Azorius Control as about 5%. So pretty much a glut, no heavy outliers. We don't have like the 60% cutter or whatever it was. So pretty flat as people kind of get a feel for the format. We're going to look Platinum Mythic rank, like I said, 3,600 games. Because we haven't hit the 7-day cap, I can't move it beyond. So we're going to get like a day or so worth of data from the old meta, or not the previous month's ranked season, but this is all new meta information. The highest win rate deck again, some of these are a smaller sample size. I put the cap a little lower to see a wider range. But we have Temur Battlecrier at 81%. So a lot of folks have been picking up this deck. Quite effective in terms of what it's doing. So we have kind of the card Temur Battlecrier. It's the engine card of the deck. So it makes your any of your spells for the turn cost 1 less for the amount of 4 power creatures you have. So you play a bunch of 4 power creatures and then you get stuff for free basically. So Outcaster Trailblazers basically pay for themselves. They draw you a bunch of cards, keep the pain train going. Roaming Throne, as well as Anti-Causal Vestige, especially with the warp side, can be free sometimes. And what you ideally want to do is name Dragon, and then you play Dragonhawk, and then it basically exiles a bunch of cards and deals a whole bunch of damage. This one's playing a Nova Hellkite. The triggers, if you have Roaming Throne, can deal multiple pings to your opponent's creatures, which works out pretty nice. Cactus Folk Sure Shot hastes out your team. World Wagon, the Llanowar Elves help you ramp. Esper Origins helps kind of set up your deck. And then there's a cool line where Battlecrier can reduce the cost of Devastating Onslaught. So every 2 4-power creatures you have is basically a free copy. So it's basically just pump a whole bunch of mana into it, haste out a bunch of stuff, and just kill your opponent that way there. Your sideboard, you have Fire Magic for the Go Wide decks, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate. Smuggler Surprise, just another way to kind of cheat it in your big stuff. You have Spectral Denial, just a counter spell that works nicer with your 4-drop creatures. Syncopate, that can kind of free cast a little bit value. Torch for cheap removal. Disdainful Stroke and Negate for kind of sweepers, big stuff. Scrap Shooter, Artifact Enchantment Hate. And then Ugin and the mid-range mirrors can just kind of go over the top. You have some colorless cards that play nice with Ugin, and then you can also cast it for cheaper with the Battlecrier out. Izzet Vivi, 75%. So this is the Vivi Cauldron deck. For those unfamiliar, if you put a Vivi underneath Cauldron, every creature you control with a counter on it gets Vivi's ability to add mana. And it also makes the Vivi mana ability stack twice. So if you have a Vivi out and then you have a Vivi under the cage, it gets the mana twice. The decks have replaced the Voldaren Thrillseeker with Draconautics Engineer. This is a way to haste out stuff. And then it also makes it so any of your creatures can just create dragons, kind of self-fulfilling. The deck's just going to draw discard a bunch to kind of set up the Cauldron engine. And then through drawing and discarding, Marauding Mako gets bigger. You have Delirium with like Fear Missing Out. Prophecy Edict puts a bunch of counters on stuff. You have Winter Night Stories, another way to draw discard. This version's on Tersa Light Shatter and 1 Kiora. Some of the decks have been picking up Steam Core Scholar, so it's kind of your choice of the top end of the deck. Will for the grindier matchups, as well as Enduring Curiosity if they have like a lot of removal. Broadside Barrage is kind of a 5 damage removal spell. Obliterating Bolt, I think, has a lot more upside in this meta right now, just with the exile clause. Killing a Vivi, for example, is not enough. Exiling is where you want to be. Strokes, cheap counters, you have along with Pierces. Braids can deal with VVs as well as the Cauldrons. Unable to scream for the bigger stuff that you can't normally deal with, and then Fire Magic as a go wide sweeper. Dimir Mid, 75. So this deck here is notably replacing some of its removal. Cut down and Go for the Throat have rotated. So what we have is Tragic Trajectory. So sorcery speed as opposed to instant. -2/2, and then it has kind of a morbid style effect. If something left the battlefield, then it gets -10/10. You're playing some Phantom Interference, which is really a 2-drop here. Nowhere to Run, Shoot the Sheriff, Bitter Triumph. Kind of the configuration. This version's only on 1 Cecil. I've seen anywhere between 1 and 4 kind of be played. We have the Preachers in this one, Tishana's Tidebinder in the main, Curiosities, Kaidos, that's your top end kind of threats mixed in. The end, just kind of a nice strip of like key things, hits Planeswalkers, hits creatures, and just takes out all the copies. Tishana's Tidebinder for activated abilities. Faebloom Trick can see mainboard play sometimes. It's very good in the mirror. Anything with like cheap flyers or just kind of all in on one creature. Shoot the Sheriff, Nowhere to Run, just more cheap removal, some cheap counters for like sweepers, big mana stuff. Intimidation Tactics as a discard effect. This is nice against like Vivi because it can hit both the Cauldron or Vivi and then exile. Graveyard Hate, Hand Hate, and a Null for artifacts and enchantments. Mono Black Aggro, so 67%. 21 land, low to the ground, so we're seeing like Cecils here, Forsaken Miner, Gas Guzzler, Stab as their removal choice here over Tragic Trajectory. Then you have Timeline Color, 2 mana, Haste 2/2, and then you can warp it back from your graveyard by paying a black mana. Or sorry, you can do it from your graveyard as well, which is nice. 1 mana, pay 2 life, kind of get it from there. Then you have Sunset Saboteur, 2 mana 4/1 with a nice ward effect. They have to force your opponent to discard a card. It does have kind of the downside whenever it attacks, the opponent gets a 1/1 counter on a creature, but it's still a big body that kind of puts through pressure, especially if your opponent doesn't have any creatures in play. Shoots, Bitter Triumphs as removal, Bloodghast can keep coming back, Dark Confidant for card advantage, and some Quarcy Revenant. Interesting, no like Preacher main, but instead having the Preacher side. Against heavier removal decks, you can kind of shift to more mid-range in Unholy Annex, Arc Enemy Charm out of the side, just flexible removal, Raise Dead, and just put counters in Lifelink. More cheap removal and Stab, Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate, Duress for Hand Hate. So Jeskai Cursed Recording, 65%. So not quite Jeskai Dragons, but a different take. Built around Cursed Recordings, that bulk rare that you got in Duskmourn that you're like, why would I ever play this? So whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you put a time counter on it. Then if there's 7 or more time counters, the Curse Recording deals 20 damage to you. But it does have the ability to tap, and then the next instant or sorcery you cast, you get to copy it. So ideally you're copying it with things like Jeskai Revelation. You can do Stock Up, you can do Lightning Helix. The Heartfire Duelist makes it so it's both damage, and then instants and sorceries have lifelink, so your burn spells gain you life. So kind of the core is taking advantage of this to either put your life total above 20, or it also just lets you kind of double like 6 damage, just try to outpace it in terms of getting the advantage and burning out your opponent. Cool thing is with the Heartfire Duelist, both Ill-Time Explosion and Fire Magic, when they deal damage, also gain you life. Otherwise, just kind of Jeskai controls to shell. Consult the Stars can be a cool one in here, just to give you another bit of card advantage. A lot of the decks are picking up some configuration of both Stock Up and that. It kind of shifts you more mid-range. You have Overlord of the Mistmoors, Bezas, so if they bring in stuff to deal with like Curse Recording, you have that. Space-Time Anomaly against the slower decks, you can just mill out your opponent, and then you have like even just doubling up this, you can like mill them say 20, 40 at a time. Ruinous Rampage is the new Brotherhood's End style effect with Split Up, Graveyard Hate, and cheap counters. Mono White Tokens. So this deck here, obviously built around Caretaker's Talent. This one's at 65%. and Enduring Innocence both draw you cards. When you get tokens to play, you get tokens with like Voice of Victory, Carrot Cake, Elspeth, Beza, Mistmores, so kind of the grindier elements there. Pinnacle Storage is the new temporary lockdown, so it exiles all artifacts and creatures, not just all permanents. And then it gives you the ability to kind of late game sack the artifact and get a bunch of tokens that way there. Seamrip is new cheap removal. You have Get Losses removal, and then some sweepers in Day Judgment. No Ultima in the main. We have Sunken Citadel in here to take advantage of Fountain Port and Demolition Field, and a whole bunch of planes. When you want to shift more mid-rangey, if you don't need like all the removal, you have Mistmores, Ultima as a sweeper along with Day Judgment, in case they're also playing a bunch of artifacts. Elspeth, just more grind. Aggressive decks, you have Beza, Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, big stuff. Elspeth Smite for aggressive decks, along with Authority at the consoles. Azorius Control, so similar concepts, obviously getting its draw engines through Consult the Stars and Stock Up, a bunch of cheap counters, Seamrip in here. You got Beza main, Ride's End, 2 mana removal, but has the upside of being exile. Ultima does a nice job of cleaning up, say, Vivi and the Cauldron. Elspeth's Stormslayer in here. Then you have Meringue River Region, Overlords, Ugin, just kind of your top end removal options. Kind of utility lands, Fountain Port, Anchorage, Demolition Field, all mixed into there. Azorius has some pretty bad mana because it doesn't have access to either a fast land or a shock land, so you have to kind of substitute it with Fabled Passage. Good thing is like the Restless Anchorage is a good land, but you're playing 7+ with the Fabled Passage in terms of tap lands. Just again, when you want to shift more mid-rangey, you have access to Overlord and Beza. Day of Judgment is another sweeper. Tishana's Tidebinder for activated ability. Clarion Conquers, nice against like the Vivi decks. Kind of an overarching statement. Shuts off the Cauldron, shuts off Vivi's activated abilities, so they could attack it on an angle there. Voice of Victory for the counterspell mirrors. Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate. Cheap counter negate. Get Lost, just flexible removal. And a null for artifacts or enchantment decks. We have Sultai Dragons, 62%. So by playing Dragons, you get access to Caustic Exhale. It's an instant that can be cast for 1 if you behold a dragon, and the just creature gets -3/3. You get Dispelling Exhale as a counterspell. We're playing Consult the Stars in here as a card advantage engine. Awaken the Honored Dead, just removal, self-mill, and then discard to kind of raise dead. Playing Taval as kind of a card that lets you take advantage of self-milling. It lets you exile cards, and then you lose... So basically each of your spells have Delve, so it gives you some utility there. And then you lose life equal to its mana cost when you play it, so you do need to offset it with some life gain, which Taval itself can provide. Summon Bahamut, Ugin could kind of be free cast potentially with Taval, taking a bunch of damage in the process, but then Meringue, Bloodvine Regent can gain you back life. Disruptive Stormbrood is early removal, and then late game could be an Artifact Enchantment Hater, and then Sweeper with Scavenger Regent. Singularity Rupture is a sweeper along with Deadly Cover-Up. You have Urgent Necropsy just as a flexible removal, hitting a bunch of stuff. Ancient Vendetta as a Stonebrain style effect. Maelstrom Pulse, flexible removal. Artifact Enchantment Hate with Seeds Ship Impact that can give you Lander to help you ramp. Cheap counters and negates, Disdainful Stroke, Graveyard Hate, and more cheap removal and Caustic Exhale. What you may want is like one of the 3 mana black removals that's just like -2/2 of your choice. You're a little chunkier on the board, and like while this is a sweeper, this is still potentially 4+ mana to actually activate it as a sweeper. Boros Mice. So it's probably the deck I'm gonna pivot to in paper. I have all the Boros lands already, and I was playing mono red mice, so it's pretty cheap to kind of move into this for RCQ season. You're playing Flowerfoot Swordmaster as an additional mouse, given that we've lost our little Heartfire hero. Sheltered by Ghost in here, and then Mabel, Heir to Craig Flame, is a lord for your mice, and then gives you a pretty useful equipment that can also trigger Valiant a whole bunch of times. Screaming Nemesis, you have the Hired Claw, and then we're seeing Whisker Veil Forerunner, 4 mana in an aggro deck, but it is a pretty useful ability here. It's 4 mana, 3/4. Whenever it becomes target spell or ability, so if you're Valiant, you look at the top 5 cards, you reveal a creature mana value 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, you put it into your hand. So it's basically just card advantage. You're naturally going to be trying to target things with like Ember or Manifold Mouse. You can, even in a pinch, like Burst Lightning it to trigger it. You have the artifact here. You have your Rockface Village in here as well. So it's kind of card advantage engine. And then Twin Maw Stormbrood just as your removal that you can then cast as a creature side. Boros has really good mana base. You have the Verge, the Fast Land, and the Shock Land all in it. And then we also have a reasonable creature line to kind of offset. Sunspine Links for the greedy mana basis, Scorching Dragonfire, removal that exiles, Graveyard Hate, Obliterating Bolt, again, just flexible removal that exiles, and then Exercise. The nice thing about going this with Boros is your removal gets a lot better between like Exercise, just dealing with some of the bigger stuff, and flexibility in terms of artifacts, enchantments, and then good Graveyard Hate and Rest in Peace. Orzhov Raise Past, so this is your Sephiroth deck. So Sephiroth wants things to die, so you gain life and drain. Raise Past wants to bring back all this stuff, so you have sack outlets in Umbral Zealot, Collar Zealot, and then just a bunch of cheap creatures that when they die, you get value. This also surveils, so Vengeful Blood Witch is another kind of Blood Artist effect. Timeline Color, like we've mentioned in the mono black, come back from the graveyard on its own. Von Dam. Blah. Words. 2 mana 2/2 that scales when creatures die, gains you life, and then kind of when it dies, it can be removal on its own. Voice of Victory in here, just again making multiple bodies. Snarling Gorehound can put bodies into the graveyard, so trade aggressively, and then you kind of get some value back. Orzhov is another deck that gets really good mana, so taking advantage of that. We have Sothera the Super Void. So everyone who got their signature $2,000 version of this card can throw it in your sideboard. Whenever a creature dies, it gets exiled, and then if a player has no creatures, you sacrifice it and then put one of those creatures on the battlefield. So against decks where things dying matter, it's another way to kind of exile. Day of Judgment in your creature deck kind of seems odd, but because you're raising past has value. Cathar Commando in here deals with artifacts, enchantments. Seam Rip is cheap removal, goes back in for Graveyard Hate, and Duress for Hand Hate. Gruul Chocobo or Landfall. So these decks here have started to adopt a second color in red for World Soul's Rage. This allows you to kind of get a backup plan of just fireballing your opponent and then bringing back a bunch of lands to trigger Landfall. You also have Ice Till Explorer that can kind of replay some of these lands from the graveyard, because sometimes what happens is you have all these things that care about landfall, but you don't have lands. So between Traveling Chocobo and then the Ice Till, it should keep a consistent amount of lands available for you to play. Otherwise, it's like your Tifa, Mossborn Hydra kind of deck. In your sideboard, you'll notice an island because you can board into Dragonback Assault. Your opponent has a bunch of removal. You can kind of play more mid-rangey. You have Ice Till to kind of just shift and kind of play your lands from your graveyard, get dragons, and beat them that way there. Siege Ship Impact deals with smaller artifacts, enchantments. Nice thing is like Seam Rip, stuff like that. The Lander is also really reasonable in this deck because it just is another way to hit Landfall. You have Repulsive Mutation as a counterspell, and then Magebane Lizard against like Vivi or the heavy spell decks. Esper Pixie, 60%. So Cosmogrand Zenith, as you have Corey Steel at home. 3 mana 2/4. Second spell either gives you 2 tokens or puts counters on each creature you control. So kind of Pixie things. Picking up your artifacts, enchantments, value plays. So Momentum Breaker, Nowhere to Run, Storm Chaser's Talon can all be picked up. You have ways to pick it up with Nurturing Pixie, Fear of Missing or Isolation, Sun Pearl Kirin. You have Cryogen Relic as a way to enters and leaves. You get to draw cards as well. Tragic Trajectory, I think in this deck is really good because there's a lot of ways to trigger Void by just things naturally leaving. And then Stock Up refills your hand. Then we have Defile Crypt for the Grindier matchups, rebuy your creatures. Kaidos, again, Grindier matchups. Sage of the Skies can be good against the aggressive deck since it can leave you 2 lifelink bodies. Pinnacle Storage is a kind of sweeper for the aggressive decks. No More Lies, cheap counter, Exercise, big thing, Seam Rip aggressive decks, Graveyard Hate with Ghost Vacuum, and a Null for artifact enchantments. We have Naya Yuna, 60%. So it seems like some of these decks are moving off of the Green Overlord. This is the second time I've seen a version of this. While it still has your big Overlords and Overlord of the Mistmoors in the Boiler Bridges, this one's a little bit lower. Notably no like Summon Knights of the Round or Summon Bahamut in this version here. Instead, you're playing like Terra to self-mill you. Summon Fenmir helps bridge. You have Banishing Light as Graveyard Hate, Treasure's Insight as a way to fill your graveyard along with Cash Grab. This one got a nice one in Seam Rip. It's just removal that can actually be brought back with Yuna in a pinch, which plays pretty nicely in that regard. Cavern for encounter ball against the like heavy blue decks. This deck's pretty soft. Like Annul, for example, or Disdainful Stroke. Chandra for when they bring in Graveyard Hate. Voice against the counterspell decks. High Noon against anything looking to play multiple spells per turn. Graveyard Hate, just flexible removal and Get Lost. Devout Decree, black and red hate. Agatha Soul Cauldron in kind of the Vivi mirrors. Anything with the graveyard, you take advantage. Braid, cheap removal, along with Torch Tower. And then lastly, so this was from Hunter 6622. They went 86 and 40. They peaked at like number 3 Mythic, I think. Let me see. Yeah, 8 Mythic over here. So they got pretty high Mythic. They're currently at like 85. And they are playing Gruul Delirium. So this one's an interesting one because they're playing no 3s. I've liked either Screaming Nemesis or just having access to something in the 3-drop slot while you can't hit it with Breakout. This one's a lot lower to the ground. We see Burst Lightnings in the main here along with a Braid, so playing a little bit more removal. Just 2 Overprotects, 2 Bushwhacks, but we're also seeing Edge Rover as another 1-drop creature that's multi-type. Full Violent Urge. I personally liked only 3. While Violent Urge is an incredibly powerful card in this deck, it doesn't do anything early game. You have to kind of get some setup. So I would probably, like, the way I would build this, I'd trim on one of these. I would potentially trim on, maybe play 3 Kenai, and then move into a couple Nemesis in the main. I do like Nemesis in these decks, especially because we've seen a lot of removal be red-based. Kind of going from there. But Summon Beholder is a nice way to get some card advantage in these decks. I've liked playing some numbers of these. It's also multi-type, with Enchantment being probably the most limited secondary type, since you just have fear of missing out otherwise. You can play Tursa. I've been like whelmed by Tursa. I think Screaming Nemesis is still better. While Tursa can provide you some draw discard, oftentimes like Nemesis is just better at pushing through damage. I don't like playing Commercial District. Some decks are playing it. Some are playing Starting Town. I hate Starting Town. I refuse to play that card. Just always comes in tapped for me. Just feels bad at any time you get it, other than like the first 1 or 2 turns. I can see playing one of these, but I think just play Ridgelines instead, personally. Then you have Stormbrood as 5 damage removal. That can be kind of found off Breakout if needed. Sunspine Links for the greedy mana bases. Chandra for when they bring in a lot of graveyard hate. Notably, if you see Rest in Peace, just board out of Beasties. They don't do anything. Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate. Pick your poison in here. Just flexible removal. I do like some number of Heritage Reclamations, just being able to target. While this is more mana efficient, the fact that it can't target isn't great. This one does allow you to deal with some flyers. So some variability in terms of this. Heritage Reclamation, Paw Patch Formation, kind of different angles to attack. Fire Magic is a sweeper. Dreadbaw's Ire, just push through more trample. Could be with Double Strike, and also can deal with like Cauldron and stuff like that. So that is it. I actually wanted to see how they're doing against the Vivi deck. I found this match kind of difficult because they can outpace you. But like good into red, pretty reasonable spread. Like the only thing they're negative against is Jeskai, which yeah, those matchups usually pretty bad. Surprised they have positive against mono white. This could be creature decks too, but I found the mono white version, like with, I guess they're not playing like temporary lockdowns as much, and they're not playing Sunfall, so it might be a little bit easier now to play against that. But that matchup used to be very hard, especially if they have like Authority and Rest in Peace and everything like that. So that is it for the week. Good luck to those playing. Let me know what you think of the Standard format, and we'll be back next week with more Standard.